guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and this week the War Within beta has added a ton of different class changes, from individual specific spec changes such as Frost Death Knight, Arcane Mages, Destruction Warlocks and such, but also this week they've did a bit more focused PvP adjustments by introducing a new array of PvP talents for a handful of some of our favorite classes, but also adjusting some of the ones that have been around for a while and even removing some of the cornerstone must-have talents that have been used in every single PvP scenario to make sure that the player versus player combat in Season 1 sees a bit of a shakeup. In today's video, I want to go over every single one of the PvP talent-specific changes that have been adjusted ever since the release of Alpha into the current beta, and go over all of the PvP-specific changes that have happened to all of our classes as of the last few beta builds. As always, if you guys enjoy regular class updates for the War Within beta, be sure to follow the channel. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So the first PvP talent we have to take a look at is Strangulate, which is being adjusted, where Strangulate now essentially replaces the Asphyxiate ability. Though if you take a look at it, I'm already talented into Asphyxiate, but Strangulate is in the red, and if you were to drag it over, you'll notice that it's pulling from a different Asphyxiate. The same cooldown, same range, but a 5-second duration versus a 4-second duration. So it's pulling from an older version of Asphyxiate somewhere in the game files. But that is the change that's happening to Death Knights. Strangulate will essentially replace Asphyxiate. So now you can choose between having a stun or a silence. They are adjusting Strangulate to basically be the same as Asphyxiate. 45-second cooldown, 40-yard range, 5-second duration, but now you can either constrict the enemy's throat to silence them or stun them outright, which, I don't know, this can be an upgrade or a downgrade depending on situation. Normally Strangulate is a minute CD, so now this gives you a more readily accessible Strangulate, but now you have to choose between a proper stun or a silence, which is really going to be matchup dependent. Now, while the Death Knight changes, I would say mostly nerf, but again, situation dependent, the nerf that is going to be appearing is the first one is for the Demon Hunter with Cleansed by Flame. This ability now will remove one magic effect instead of all magic effects. So that's going to mean that you have a little bit less of this ability to shed dots or shed certain effects off of you. This is definitely going to impact having Demon Hunters by quite a bit, giving them a less good defensive option, but it's at least now, I guess, a little bit more in line to other self-dispel abilities or dispel style effects. But yeah, definitely a little bit of a downgrade going forward. Though next, I want to move on to the class of Druids, where we can start taking a look at actual new PvP talent additions, starting with Tireless Pursuit. For 3 seconds after leaving cat form or travel form, you retain up to 40% of that form's movement speed. So baseline as a feral druid, you do get extra movement speed whenever you go into cat form. So if you leave it, you now get to retain a good portion of that movement speed, essentially increasing your movement speed by 40%. That's going to give you quite a bit of movement, especially if someone who is actively shifting between cat form and your travel form may give you actually quite a bit of decent mobility. And then we have the talent of High Winds, which has been adjusted. Previously, High Winds used to be a talent that buffed Cyclone, where after enemies leave Cyclone, they are then debuffed for 3 seconds, reducing their damage and healing by 15% for a short moment. Now the talent has been adjusted to be a little bit more generic, which increases the range of Cyclone, Typhoon, and Entangle Roots by 5 extra yards. So you look at a 30-yard Cyclone, a 45-yard Entangling Root, and roughly 23 yards of a Typhoon. This is a decent adjustment, but nothing crazy. The extra range can be good in very specific situations, but it's more of a generic talent adjustment more than anything. I think the adjustment does make it more universal, but it's definitely less of a playmaker talent than it was previously. Then we have the spec of Fire Mage, where we actually see a brand new talent addition of Fireheart. Blazing Barrier's damage is being increased by 500%. And there's a couple of different talents that interact with Blazing Barrier that either allow you to regain the barrier a little bit quicker, such as Accumulative Shielding for example, or the ability to double up on barriers such as Mass Barrier. But also we have the Barrier Diffusion talent. Whenever one of your barriers is removed, it reduces cooldown by 4 seconds. So being able to increase the damage of your barrier while also being able to increase its uptime can be somewhat of a strategy, especially against melee classes. Which is one of the unique things about Fire Mages, is their ability to deal with melee combatants. By increasing the amount of damage they take with every single hit of your barrier, it actually allows you to create a bit of additional passive damage against the target. However, as mages gain a new talent, they actually lose one of their more popular ones, which is Flame Cannon, which actually Fireheart takes the same exact icon of Flame Cannon. Flame Cannon previously would be a talent that allowed you to gain additional health, damage, and even spell range the longer you are away from other enemies and creatures. It is an obviously very strong talent for a class as mobile as a mage, and it was a must-have talent for basically most situations, though Fireheart kind of is like a reverse of it, where with Flame Cannon you want it to be away from others. Fireheart is one of those talents that ends up coming into clutch whenever somebody does eventually get on top of you, which isn't really a fantastic one-to-one replacement, but it does make it a little bit better in certain situations. Now, another class that's actually seen a few new talents has been the class of Monk, with Mistweaver and Windwalker both getting the talent of Rodeo, which plays heavily off of the new ability of Clash, which a lot of monks have actually picked up on and been using and enjoying, at least when it comes to PvP content specifically, because of its like interesting rooting, charging mechanic that it offers. The Rodeo ability allows for every 3 seconds while Clash is off cooldown for your next clash to be reactivated immediately to wildly clash an additional enemy. This effect can also stack up to 3 times. Essentially what this allows you to do is to bank up a bunch of charges of clash and then be able to utilize it against more than one target. So you can use it against your primary foe if you want to, but actually you could just keep using it against the same foe if you wish, or against a different target if that is what you choose. Though the target of clash seems to be kind of all over the place. As you saw me, I targeted a train dummy, but instead clashed towards, well, my human train dummy, as it seems to just select an additional enemy or randomly all on its own. But if you are, let's say, in a situation where you can maybe pull an enemy or keep them rooted over and over and over, then you can utilize Rodeo to either lock enemies down in place so they're not able to move, or to be able to chain clash back to back against an enemy just to keep them rooted in one place for as long as possible, which may offer some additional control options. Though another talent is a little bit more straightforward compared to Clash, which has like very specific uses or very interesting unique uses, and that is the Ryzen Dragon Sweep. For Windwalker Monk specifically, Whirling Dragon Punch now knocks enemies up into the air and causes them to fall slowly until they reach the ground. Normally, Whirling Dragon Punch is an ability that knocks the monk up into the air, and it makes it a little bit difficult for you to kind of like control yourself because you literally are up in air jumping. But now you can not only put yourself midair, but also other players midair as well, which can give you even more additional crowd control options since they fall down slowly. This allows you to either follow up with maybe Ring of Peace or a leg sweep, but if anything, it allows you a little bit better control to be able to add a little bit extra disruption elements. This also can work out pretty well against casters, especially if they're not instant cast heavy, because being able to take them off the ground leaves them from being able to hard cast spells back into you, leaving them with a little bit of a smaller kit of abilities that are available for them. But most importantly, as the monk goes up into the air, you're no longer kind of staggering yourself, giving enemies the opportunity to escape you. Now as you go flying, so do they, so you can kind of have a bit better uptime over the target, which I think can make Whirling Dragon Punch quite a good ability even when it comes to the smaller disruptions. As a side note, for monks that are playing the Celestial, or rather the Conduit of the Celestial hero talent, you do have a bonus additional hero spec that you will need to spec into, which is going to take up one of the important PvP slots, and that is the talent of Absolute Serenity. Celestial Conduit, which is a channeled ability, now prevents incapacitate, disorients, snares, root effects for its duration. Notice that there are only certain CC that are prevented, like incapacitates or disorients, which is things like fears and blinds, but not stuns in particular. But if you do end up playing Conduit of the Celestial, this could give you an opportunity to get some immunity from crowd control that can be timed against certain moments. This one may be good if you're just trying to remove crowd control out of the situation. I think primarily this will be maybe good as a healer, but not necessarily as a Windwalker, especially since you can pick up some talents that provide you with additional CC or maybe additional utility. But it is an option that is available for Conduit of the Celestial specifically. The next talent is going to be one for the class of Paladin, which is available for all paladins with the Wrench Evil. which allows your turn evil cast time to be reduced by 100%, essentially eliminating the cast time of the ability, making it fully instant cast in PvP. Turn evil is a fear effect that can be utilized on very specific enemies such as undeads, aberrations, or demons, forcing them to flee for 6 seconds. It's very, very specific in terms of how it functions and what it functions on, but if you just want to have an instant cast way to be able to deal with a warlock's pet, or let's say if a Death Knight presses Lichborn, which does make him undead for a short amount of time, you can now use this ability to instantly deal with that target. A very specific usage for this one, but it does give paladins a little bit extra crowd control. That instantaneous CC I think could be good and may end up making this talent better for paladins in certain situations, but a little bit more annoying for warlocks and death knights when facing against paladins. Then we have the class of Priest, which sees the return of the old familiar favorite of PvP side of things, Mind Games, which is no longer a talent in the class tree that has been replaced with things such as Cauterizing Shadows, Manipulation, and Phantom Reach to give more PvE availability while locking out a PvP slot just for the ability of Mind Games. However, they did end up amping it just a little bit if you are having to commit into this ability from the PvP section, by increasing the duration of the Mind Games by 2 additional seconds, as well as damage, damage reversal, healing reversal, all increased by 33%, which gives Mind Games, I believe, a fairly popular and a very sought after PvP talent, though now making it a little bit harder to pick between which talents you want as a Holy Priest, a Disc Priest, or a Shadow Priest. I think in most cases, Mind Games is going to be a must-play situation because it can lock out a target from being able to take healing and putting him in a much more dangerous situation, but it's now competing against some of the other utility and offensive talents as well, which can make it a little bit more of a tighter pick for priests going forward. For the class of Shaman, we don't necessarily have a new talent, but rather a different way to interact with the ability of Sky Fury Totem, which has now been adjusted to function off of Primordial Wave. Primordial Wave automatically summons the totem at your feet for 15 seconds, then increases the critical strike damage and healing of all spells and nearby allies by 20% for 15 seconds, which essentially just kind of forces you to pick up your Primordial Wave ability if you want to play around Sky Fury Totem. I mean, Primordial Wave for the most part is a staple for a lot of Shaman builds, so you're probably going to be picking it up anyway. But let's say you want to play a different build that doesn't necessarily play into Primordial. Now you have a talent that is tied to an ability you would want, which is Sky Fury. On the other hand, that does save you a global. So if you're trying to set up a big go with a Primordial and Sky Fury, just using one ability to get both effects at the same time is how you would be able to unleash a bunch of Lava Bursts as Elemental Shaman or Big Lightning Bolts as enhancement. But for Restoration, it's a little bit awkward because now you have to use Primordial Wave to buff your allies, where previously you would just drop Sky Fury Totem when people in your group have cooldowns, and then you could use Primordial Wave for a heal at a later time. But now you have to use Primordial Wave to activate the offensive power of everybody else on your team. So I like the idea behind it, but I don't really know. It's just kind of, I think it just creates some awkward situations because now you're using Primordial, not for your own healing, but just to buff everybody's damage, and something about that just feels a little weird. As for Warlocks, we did see a slight buff to the Fel Lord, and by slight I mean an 80% damage increase for the main demon. However, the demon does have very specified uses. The damage is going to be a little bit better, especially if multiple enemies stack there. He does have a positional requirement, however, and a little bit more health to work with than before, so it should make him a little bit more formidable. But yeah, as it stands, I guess it's a nice buff when it comes to zonal or anti-melee protection, but as you can see, decent bit of damage, nothing crazy. However, Warlocks do lose a very good and a very popular talent, and if you are carefully looking, then you will notice that the ability of Fel Obelisk is no longer here, which is an ability that you place kind of like a totem on the ground that empowers all of your demons, which is kind of a big change for Warlocks since that was probably their best PvP talent by far. But I guess what they're trying to do is trying to make them a little bit more situational, a little bit less damage focused, except for Master Summoner. But I guess now with the hole that is left with Fel Obelisk removed, maybe there's opportunity for a Fel Lord to fill that hole. And lastly, we have the class of Warrior, which has gotten a couple adjustments for both Arms and Fury. Starting off, for Arms Warrior specifically, the ability Storm of Destruction has been adjusted to now include a healing reduction for the enemy target. Now on the blue post, it says that it's supposed to add a healing reduction of 25% for 10 seconds, but on here in the tooltip you can see that the healing reduction is actually 50% from your Bladestorm or Ravager. So not only do you slow a target by 60%, but also put up a Mortal Strike effect on them on top of it for free. But when you actually hit the training dummy with the ability, it does apply a slow on them, but also a 50% effect Mortal Strike. So yeah, it's actually a full-on Mortal Strike as of right now. And as I'm sitting down editing this video, I actually did remember that all Mortal Strike effects, so healing reduction effects, are actually doubled in PvE content, but are back to the original value within PvP. So I imagine that this number should actually be 25 when it used against player targets. Either way, they're trying to make Bladestorm even better than before, giving warriors an opportunity to cleave a Mortal Strike on just about everybody, which will give arms a little bit more of that unique pressure that not as many classes can spread the Mortal Strike effect as easily and effectively. Though, if anything, they are reducing the uptime of your Bladestorm with the changes to Blade Master's Torment as well as Warlord's Torment. So the only way for Warrior to really use Bladestorm and to gain this effect is by pressing the Bladestorm ability. No longer are you going to be able to rotate from Avatar Bladestorm into a Natty Bladestorm. Now you can just play around Bladestorm, so they are trying to make it a little bit better as a lockdown feature going forward. Also, the talent of Duel has been made a little bit easier to see, specifically for the player getting hit by Duel. But you can see that warriors themselves also do have this red reticle around just about every other target when you do end up dueling them. But they're trying to make some of those visual specific abilities of you challenging a specific target a little bit easier to manage. Then we have the spec of Fury Warrior starting with Enduring Rage, which reads, you have a chance to become enraged while you're suffering movement impairing effects. Suffering a loss of control effect has a chance to grant you recklessness for 5 seconds. Which removes the need for you to be enraged in order to gain the ability of recklessness. The duration of recklessness granted has also been increased by 1 second, which may be good as a potentially consistent talent that will allow you to kind of jump back into the fray after suffering a CC ability. Then we also got adjustments to the ability of Slaughterhouse, which interacts a little bit better with some of the other Mortal Strike effects. Rampage, Onslaught, and Odin's Fury damage reduces the healing of the target receives by 3% for 20 seconds, stacking up to 12 times. The thing is though, Slaughterhouse previously had a weirdness where it didn't really potentially stack super well with other healing effects, but now it will stack alongside with other Mortal Strike effects, though it doesn't really take effect until the value of your Slaughterhouse actually surpasses other Mortal Strike effects. So as I'm getting to 27%, and let's say there's already a Mortal Strike from another warrior, you will still see Slaughterhouse stacking up. But when Slaughterhouse takes over the Mortal Strike in its Mortal Strike, it actually will overwrite other Mortal Strike effects, thus allowing Fury Warriors to actually reach some of the bigger healing reduction options, or at least passive healing reduction options, though they do, again, like I said before, need to be stacked up, but at least it's a bit better interaction with some of the other effects. That does allow Fury to kind of start dominating once its Mortal Strike effect has exceeded all of the other target's options. But with that, that's going to be the entire list of PvP talent changes that have happened as of this week's beta build. And it seems that as of this build, they're trying to give more choices for classes, but at the same time removing some of the more popular picks in order to create those choices. Like talents usually lock in for every encounter, it seems that they're trying to strip certain playstyles completely off them and give them more situational options so that you're probably speccing out a different loadout with hopefully every new matchup, which is an interesting adjustment that I actually would like to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Do you like some of the changes they've done for these PvP talents? What are your thoughts on some of the new options? What are your thoughts about some of the new options that have been made available as of recently? Do you think that it's good that they're rotating out some of the more often picked talents, or do you think that maybe they should still keep them, but maybe make more competitive options while keeping what has worked thus far? Let me know all of those thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.